Hello, welcome back to my channel. Happy 2021. I hope this year is better for the world and for all of us. Today I'm going to be talking about another case where someone featured on reality television went on to murder someone. So I'm going to be talking about wife swap and the Stockdale Family Murders. Before I get into it, if you like commentary or true crime content, I make that, so if you want to subscribe to my channel, that would be nice, and like and comment if you feel so inclined. Let's get into it. Wife Swap was an American reality television show that was distributed by ABC beginning in 2004. The premise was essentially that two different families with opposing lifestyles or parenting styles would swap lives for 2 weeks. The goal was to expose the families to different ways of life, so maybe they could learn from each other or be more moderate in their own parenting styles and lifestyles. The original Wife Swap series ran for 7 seasons, running from 2004 to 2010. Then a spin-off started airing in 2013 called Celebrity Wife Swap, and it was the same premise except that they would enlist D-list celebrities to like swap lives for the day, or not the day, sorry, the 2 weeks. Then the original series was rebooted in 2019 and was distributed by Paramount Network, but this one only ran for 2 seasons, so it ended and was canceled this year in last year. Now it's 2021, so it was canceled in 2020. And then there's also a British version of the show. The show seemed pretty innocuous and innocent, but there was some controversy surrounding some of the families that they chose to put on the show. They displayed extremes, so sometimes people were concerned for the children based on how they were being raised when it was aired. One case of this was the episode that I'm going to be talking about today, which is the Stockdale and Tonkovitch family wife swap episode, which ultimately ended in tragedy. I'm sure there was a lot of dramatization to the show, as most reality television programs sort of get the people on the show to be overdramatic and hype up maybe minor qualities they have and exacerbate them just so more people tune in. In fact, one young lady, Alicia Guccifaro, whose family was featured on a 2008 episode of Wife Swap, ended up suing ABC in 2010 for their depiction of her. She was 16 at the time of filming, and she claimed that producers had asked her to be more bratty and just like hype up her selfishness. And this, after the episode aired, she said she got a lot of pushback. She wasn't able to make friends. She was publicly embarrassed, and she said this ended up causing her to have panic attacks and suicidal ideation. And then the lawsuit itself was settled out of court in 2010, and the terms were not disclosed to the public. But the episode I'm going to be focusing on today, as I said before, was the Stockdale Tonkovitch episode. So they were featured on an episode in 2008. It was season 4, episode 15. The other family featured in the episode was the Tonkovitch family, and they appeared much more liberal, open-minded, and free-spirited in contrast to the Stockdales. The Tonkovitch parents sort of allowed their children to make their own decisions and just explore life in general, but they just seemed like pretty loving and average parents, though they were they were portrayed to be a little bit too lax on the show. The Stockdales, on the other hand, were portrayed as a much stricter family. The Stockdale family consisted of Mother Kathy, Father Tim, and then their 4 sons. I'm gonna say the 4 sons' ages at the time of filming. So there was Calvin, who was 19, Charles, who was 16, Jacob, who was 15, and James, who was 11. The family had a bluegrass band called the Stockdale Family Band, and all 4 sons played alongside their father in this band. And then their mother, Kathy, was sort of the band manager, so she would like do all the like signing them up for shows and concerts. She would sell their CDs, and she would manage the band's finances. At the time the episode aired, the entire family lived on a farm in rural Ohio. The parents said that they had moved away from the city to protect and shelter their sons. They wanted to instill wholesome values into their sons. And then during the episode, their father, Tim, talks about how on the day they moved, or they were moving out of the city, they heard gunshots go off in the city, and this solidified to Tim that they had made the correct decision for their kids. The Stockdale family were devout Christians, so the kids weren't allowed to watch TV. They weren't allowed to play video games. This was a response by the Stockdale parents to sort of censor what their children consumed media-wise. They were allowed to listen to certain radio stations that were picked by their parents. So I would assume they were more like religious radio shows or like bluegrass shows, something like that. They also weren't allowed to swear. They weren't allowed to date until they were ready to get married. And the children were homeschooled by their mother, Kathy, to further shelter them from outside influence. After the two families swapped on the episode of A Wife Swap, Lori Tonkovitch, which is the other mother, cried multiple times during filming because of how the Stockdale family the Stockdale kids were being raised, because she felt that they lacked freedom and independence to make their own choices and just choose what they wanted to do in their own lives. At the end of each wife swap episode, the two sets of parents sit down with each other to sort of discuss what they learned from the switch. During the Stockdale Tonkovitch family, this happened, but the Stockdale parents, Kathy and Tim, seemed extremely cynical about the whole experience. They said they basically learned nothing from the switch and they wouldn't be changing their parenting at all. And this made Lori and her husband, who were pretty gracious at the beginning in the conversation, just super upset, and they left in a huff. So after filming, Kathy did an interview, and apparently when casting for season 4 of Wife Swap, ABC deliberately was seeking a bluegrass family. I have to plead my ignorance here. I really don't know what a bluegrass family is. From my Googling and research, it appears that it's just more like a wholesome sort of country sect. Sometimes it's intersected with religion, specifically Christian values, which is what the Stockdale Family Band was they were a gospel bluegrass band. Anyways, so ABC reached out to a man named David Russell, who is a bluegrass musician, and they reached out to him to ask if he knew anyone that would want to be on the show, and then he recommended the Stockdale family. Kathy and Tim Stockdale were pretty hesitant at first to appear on the show, but the boys were really excited about it, so they did appear on the show. After filming, Kathy described her experience on A Wife Swap as, quote, "Being a farm, homeschooling, bluegrass band family, we enjoy a lot of common experiences, but we have to chalk the Wife Swap adventure as the grand family bonding experience for the Stockdales, which we will never be the same. We relate differently in that we have even more and deeper collective experiences where we overcame obstacles and accomplished a giant task together. No one else will understand the wife swap journey like we do, and that is one of the things that will make our family unit different and special forever." So that was that, and the Stockdale family continued on as normal after the wife swap episode aired. They continued playing in their family band, which they toured annually. They toured mostly in their home state of Ohio, but they also toured in neighboring states such as Indiana, Michigan, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania. Kathy, who I said managed the band, also wrote and managed the band's website, which was the StockdaleFamilyBand.com, which has now been deactivated after the murders. But on the website, Kathy wrote about different things. She actually published the sort of manuscript or manual that she gave to ABC for her filming of Wife Swap. So each family has to give ABC a typed out document of like just explaining how in detail how they raise their kids and their parenting styles. So Kathy published this on her website for people to read. So I'm going to go through some of the parts in the manual that were of interest to me or that I think are relevant in this case. So at one point, Kathy writes, quote, "Our children are being raised away from violent language, sexual influences, drinking, smoking, drugs, and rap music, all the things we left behind in the city. Instead, we are raising out children on a diet of wholesome activities and farm work, keeping our minds pure and their bodies healthy, and keeping out the influences of modern society. That is also why we homeschool." She then goes on to explain what is allowed and what is not allowed in the Stockdale family home. So as I said before, they banned processed fast foods, they banned TV, video games, and the children or the sons couldn't date until they were ready to get married. And the Stockdale sons, their internet access was heavily monitored and extremely limited. Kathy also explains that her and her husband practice traditional gender roles in the household. So for them, this means that Tim has a full-time job and he leaves the household every day to go work his full-time job. And whereas Kathy stays at home with the children, where she cooks, cleans, and just homeschools the kids. It's not so strictly gender roles. It appears to me, at least, that both Tim and Kathy had an equal say in issues relating to their family, so they could both freely express their own opinions, and they both shared control of the finances, etc., or at least that's what Kathy said on the website. She then goes into an extremely detailed Q&A explanation about the Stockdale family life. At one point, when answering a question about schooling and homework, Kathy says, quote, "Teaching a child that it is okay to fail is not acceptable in my book. I never pass the boys if they have a C or even a B. They have to achieve an A grade in a subject before moving on." Then, when describing leisure and social life, Kathy says that the boys have very little free time to pick their own activities. Their daily schedule is very regimented by their parents. Like every task, every activity is predetermined by Kathy and Tim. And she says this is because, quote, that she does not promote a lot of leisure time for the boys. "I insist that the boys have a focus and purpose to any activity so that the boys do not become corrupted by meaningless relationships." So my interpretation of this is that when they were growing up, the boys had a limited social interaction that wasn't supervised by their parents. Like whoever they associated with had to pass their parents' sort of wholesome standard to even talk to the sons. So the family formed their family band in 2004, and it originally had 5 members, which were their father Tim and then the 4 sons, Calvin, Charles, Jacob, and James. Eventually, into their adulthood, the eldest 2 sons, Calvin and Charles, move away and left the family band to sort of pursue their own lives. So eldest son Calvin, who is currently, I believe, in his early to mid 30s, he used to play the banjo in the family band, but he moved away to Michigan, where he is currently employed by Hillsdale College. So according to Calvin's LinkedIn that I found, he had received his BA from Hillsdale College in 2010. His BA was in history, and then he has been working for the college pretty much right after he graduated. So Calvin works within the college's institutional advancement department. So essentially he just works with donors and stuff, and maintains the college's good relationships with donors, so they continue to donate to the school, stuff like that. To my understanding, Calvin is currently married, and him and his wife have 5 children and still live in Michigan. Then the second eldest son, Charles, who is now in his late 20s and played the mandolin in the band, moved away to Philadelphia to study for his doctorate. He is currently a biochemist and has a YouTube channel where he occasionally posts his own music. I will link it below because he's currently active on it. So after Calvin and Charles moved away from their family home, the Stockdale Family Band shrunk to 4 members, which then included the father Tim, brothers Jacob and James, and their family friend named Joe Steiner. In 2016, James and Jacob actually did a phone interview just talking about their own experience with the family band with a journalist named Dan Kane. In the article, the brothers seem very content and they seem like they have a good relationship with each other and their family. They seem very intelligent and just good boys. It's sort of like eerie to read after realizing what happened to that family only a year later. On the family's now defunct website, Jacob Stockdale was described as, quote, the man in the middle who sees important things. He played the fiddle in the family's band and had received a lot of accolades for his amazing fiddle playing. So Jacob Stockdale was the 3rd child born to his parents, Kathy and Tim Stockdale, and he was born on May 28th, 1992. He seemed just like any other family member of the Stockdale family, and as I said, he was a very talented and dedicated fiddle player. He played the fiddle in 2 bands growing up, which included the Stockdale Family Band and then also the Holmes County Bluegrass. In 2015, Jacob and his younger brother James released a duet album called Farm Fresh. After the 2 eldest brothers moved out of the family home, the Stockdale family then consisted of just 4 members, or 4 members lived on the farm, which was Jacob, James, and then the parents Kathy and Tim. It appears that Jacob didn't decide to pursue any education after high school like his 2 or the rest of his brothers did. So because Calvin had a BA in history, Charles has a doctorate, and then James was attending Kent State at the time of his murder for business management because he wanted to get involved in the business side of his family's band. But Jacob didn't decide to pursue anything, even though obviously he was allowed because his parents had allowed the rest of his siblings to do it, but he seemed pretty content in his life as a farmer and a musician. Kathy Stockdale had also created a YouTube channel where she would share videos of the brothers playing music and just little clips of their families. The last video uploaded to the channel was in May 2017, and it was titled Who's the Fool? And it featured James Stockdale promoting like a special April Fool's event that the family band was putting on.
Oh, hello everyone. I'd like to invite you to the 9th annual Stockdale Family Band Bluegrass and Gospel Show on April Fool's Day. You won't have to be the fool though. We got that covered for you. Click above for more details.
It's sad to watch because James seems so happy and full of life and just like a funny, normal kid. Not kid, he's 21, but just like a funny, normal guy in this video. To this day, it is still unclear what motivated Jacob Stockdale to do what he did next. So a week before the Stockdale Family Murders, the Stockdale family attended a musical get-together with family and family friends. One family friend who was present was named Steve Todd, and he said that Jacob Stockdale had left that get-together early because he wasn't feeling well, but nothing seemed extremely out of the ordinary. Like, Jacob seemed like his regular self. And then That Sunday on June 11th, the family band played their last show together at a Canton Symphony Orchestra fundraiser, and as I said, everything seemed normal. On Thursday, June 15th, 2017, Jacob, James, and Kathy were all present in the Stockdale family home, and then Tim had gone out, presumably to work for the day. Someone inside the Stockdale family house dialed 911 at 4:36 p.m. that night, and police said it was a hang-up call, meaning that someone just called 911 and then hung up without saying anything. And when this happens, Stark County Police just dispatches officers right away to the home just to check in and see if everything's okay. So officers were dispatched after the hang-up call to the Stockdale family farm. When officers arrived at the family's house, the door was wide open, and through the open door they could see someone lying on the floor. So they tried to verbally call out to see if anyone was alive in the house, and then no one responded, and then they heard a gunshot go off right after they called out. So the officers called for backup, and when backup arrived, they entered the Stockdale family house, and when they entered, they found Jacob Stockdale, who was 25 at the time, laying close to the front door entrance of the house, bleeding profusely from a single gunshot wound to his head, but he was still alive at the time. It then appeared to police that after they had verbally called out, Jacob had tried to complete suicide by shooting himself in the head. Then the police went to search the entire house to see if anyone else was in there, and they discovered two deceased bodies. One was James Stockdale, who was 21 at the time, and he was also close to the front door of the house. And then they discovered Kathy Stockdale upstairs in the bathroom. They had both died from gunshot wounds. And then police determined that Jacob Stockdale had shot first his mother, then his younger brother James Stockdale with a shotgun, before then attempting suicide and shooting himself in the head. Since Jacob was still alive, he was then rushed to Cleveland Metro Health Medical Hospital in Ohio, where he remained in critical condition for quite a while. In the aftermath, police clarified to the public and the media that they had never received any distressing phone calls from the house, and Jacob Stockdale didn't have a criminal history. They had never received any information that would have concerned or any warning signs, so police had no idea what the motive of this murder was. According to a neighbor of the Stockdale family often shot guns for sport or for fun, so when he heard about 10 to a dozen gunshots that day, he thought they were just like playing with their guns, so it wasn't concerning to him. A few days after the murders, the eldest son Calvin released a statement about Jacob saying, quote, "I speak for our family when I say we love him and forgive him." Calvin also clarified that he had no idea why Jacob would commit these murders. Tim, the father, in collaboration with the police, said that Jacob didn't have a mental or a history of mental health issues, and that there was no abuse happening in the house at the time of the murders.
It's hard to, kind of surmise what the motive may have been. There's some speculation. Don't really want to get into that part of it, but we'll continue to investigate this case and try to determine if there's a motive. Just do not know.
So, resulting from the self-inflicted gunshot wound to his head, Jacob Stockdale experienced significant brain damage, so he wasn't able to be arrested right away after the murders. It took around over a year for him to be arrested. He was finally arrested in September 2018 for 2 counts of murder when it was discovered that he had been released from the hospital and he was able to communicate with others and walk around. After being served an arrest warrant, Jacob turned himself over to authorities and was kept at Stark County Jail awaiting a trial and just further court proceedings beginning on September 28th. 2018. In January 2019, Jacob Stockdale, alongside his counsel, pled not guilty to the 2 counts of murder by reason of insanity.
Having had a chance to review the previous report issued by Psychodiagnostic, I am also going to be filing the not guilty by reason of insanity plea and ask the court to order the appropriate evaluations for that plea also.
In response, the judge presiding over Jacob's case which was Judge Forcioni. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Sorry, Judge, if it's not. But the judge who was presiding over his case ordered Jacob to undergo a competency evaluation to determine if he was competent to stand trial. So essentially, a competency trial is just determining if he has the wherewithal and the cognitive capacity to understand court proceedings, because it would be unlawful and unreasonable if he wasn't cognitively able to understand the court proceedings to then put him on trial. So Jacob's first competency evaluation was conducted by Dr. Lynn Luna Jones, and she did find that he was competent to stand trial as he didn't have any mental illness that would prevent him from understanding the legal proceedings and assisting in his own defense. After these results came out, his counsel asked for a second opinion, so a second evaluation, which the judge allowed. The second competency evaluation was conducted by Dr. James Karpowicz. Dr. James Karpowicz actually opposed the first evaluation and said that Jacob did have a mental illness that would prevent him from understanding the charges and assisting in his own defense. But Dr. Karpowicz expanded, saying that he believed that Jacob's competency would be he would become competent within a year of extensive mental health treatment. And this treatment had to address Jacob's struggles with depression. Based on the second evaluation, Judge Forcioni ruled that Jacob would be transferred to Heartland Behavioral Healthcare Hospital, which is basically a secure psychiatric hospital for adults in Massillon, Ohio. So he would be transferred there to receive the extensive treatment that he needed, so he would be able to be competent to stand trial. So he was immediately transferred after this judgment to the mental health hospital from the Stark County Jail in May 2019 and immediately underwent an extensive mental health treatment. So over the next 7 months, Jacob received care at the psychiatric hospital, where he was under the primary care of psychologist Dr. James Pontow. While at the hospital, Jacob was diagnosed with a major neurocognitive disorder, which is just the DSM term for dementia. So it appeared that the brain damage he received from the self-inflicted gunshot wound had affected his memory. At the beginning of his time in the psychiatric hospital, Dr. Pontow stated that Jacob had trouble communicating and would often mumble his responses to others. But this was improved by adjusting his medications, which they then started to put him on medications that would help stabilize his anxiety. So Jacob's primary treatment with Dr. Pontow consisted of him trying to restore his cognitive memory. So they did this by using flashcards, undergoing quizzes, and holding mock trials to sort of teach Jacob about trials and what trials consisted of. Dr. Pontow determined that Jacob did not have any psychotic disorders, which would include things like schizophrenia. There had apparently been some speculation that Jacob was suffering from some sort of psychotic disorder when he committed the murders, so some sort of like hallucinations. There were recorded instances while Jacob was in the hospital when he was telling staff members that at the hospital that he could walk through walls, and there was also an instance where he told of family members that insects were spying on him. But Dr. Pontau said when he heard of these accusations, he asked Jacob right away if there were any validity to them, and Jacob said he had never experienced hallucinations in his life, and Dr. Pontau dismissed these accusations or any possible psychotic disorder that Jacob was suffering from, because he said Jacob may be faking it to help his defense. During his stay at the hospital, Jacob tried to escape twice. His first attempt was in November 2019. He tried to escape by hiding between book stacks in the hospital library, which concerned hospital staff because they thought he was trying to get out somehow. I don't really understand that one. There's not a lot of information, but they believed he was trying to escape. And then his second attempt happened about a month later, and he tried just hiding in a group of people that were leaving the hospital, but they obviously caught him. Then in February 2020, after 7 months of treatment, Jacob and his counsel returned to court, where Dr. Pontau said that he believed Jacob was now competent to stand trial. Pontau stated that he believed Jacob was now competent because he was able to understand the justice system, plea options, and the plea bargaining system. However, he did expand, stating that Jacob might need some accommodations throughout the trial because he had delayed processing or cognitive processing, so he might need to have certain things written down for him or explained to him slowly. It's very common for people with traumatic brain injuries to have slower processing times. However, even after this testimony from Dr. Pontau, the trial continued to be delayed because Jacob's attorney was now requesting a sanity evaluation, which would determine if during the time of the murders, if he was suffering some sort of psychotic disorder. So Dr. Arcangela Wood was assigned to conduct Jacob's sanity evaluation in April of 2020. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, she was unable to meet with him in person, so their interview was conducted through a Zoom thing, video chat. And Dr. Wood said that Jacob was extremely uncooperative. He wouldn't communicate with her at all. He wouldn't respond to any of her questions, and he refused to participate in the evaluation. Because he had refused to participate in the sanity evaluation, Jacob was forced to go in front of Judge Forcioni to sort of explain why he had refused to participate in the sanity evaluation. Again, because of COVID-19 restrictions, Jacob was unable to be in person in front of the judge, so it was through a video chat Zoom-like thing again. During this hearing, there's some of it publicly available online. Judge Forcioni addresses him multiple times, directly asking him questions, and Jacob does not answer at all. He gives no verbal or physical cues that he's even hearing what the judge is saying.
Mr. Stockdale, are you able to hear me? First of all, officer, can you hear me?
Yes, Your Honor, we can hear you.
Okay, and thank you. Mr. Stockdale, I am Judge Frank Forcioni. Are you able to hear me today? Okay, he is not responding. My first concern was whether they could hear, and the officer standing behind him can hear. Mr. Stockdale, can you see your lawyers here today, Mr. Kazanis and Mr. Graham? Okay, again, he's not responding, but he is seated there.
His defense lawyers explain that Jacob's refusal to participate in both the sanity evaluation and his refusal to communicate with Judge Ferchoni was because he had difficulty processing using technology, and they believed that he may be even afraid of communicating through technology. So based on this information by Jacob's counsel, the judge extended the time allowed for the sanity evaluation by another 30 days. If he didn't participate, then he would just have to proceed with the trial. To accommodate Jacob's potential fear of technology and just slower processing through technology, they decided to have Dr. Wood go in person to the hospital to conduct the sanity evaluation. So on August 25th, 2020, Dr. Wood went to the psychiatric hospital to conduct the evaluation, but he still wouldn't participate, and he still didn't answer any of her questions and refused to participate in the evaluation. So the judge then calls Jacob back to court because of his refusal, and on September 8th, they're all brought back to trial, and the judge is just determining how to proceed with the trial because of all these delays, because of Jacob's refusal to participate in the process. And Jacob was present in person at this hearing because of his fear of technology. During this hearing, the judge does address Jacob again, and this time Jacob does verbally communicate with the judge, showing that he is listening and he can communicate.
Mr. Stockdale, can you hear me first of all?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, okay, and you're able to respond to me today?
Yes.
Okay, good. I don't want to ask any more questions beyond that. That would be improper.
His lawyers then clarify that this improvement is because, or they believe it is because, he has recently been prescribed antipsychotic medication. So they believe this is why his communication is getting better. His defense pleads that Jacob was unwilling to participate in the sanity evaluation because he couldn't fully appreciate the significance and purpose of the evaluation. His counsel also explains that Jacob is extremely guarded and barely socializes with people he isn't comfortable with, so that's why he wouldn't talk to Dr. Wood. His defense insists that Jacob now understands that he needs to participate in the sanity evaluation because he has been encouraged by people he trusts, such as his counsel and his father and family members. So the judge decided that he was going to still finally set a date for trial because it had been delayed for way too long. So he set a trial date for January 26, 2021, but he was allowing Jacob one more chance to receive the sanity evaluation. So Dr. Wood would go visit him one more time, and if Jacob was uncooperative, this was his final time.
The charges here are very serious, and as a judge, my job is to make sure you get a fair trial. I mean, that's my goal in every trial. I don't prejudge anything, and I'm bending over backwards to make sure that you get a fair chance here, okay? But when we get to competency issues and evaluations for sanity, the only way we can proceed is if you participate. I mean, you have to participate. You have two really good lawyers. I mean, they're not good lawyers, they're outstanding lawyers. And I would have never appointed them to you if I didn't trust them. And I can't say enough good things about them. But they can only adequately represent you if you work with them and talk to them. This may be a strange environment for everybody here, but the justice system does have to proceed in this case. I am setting the trial date, but I'm also then going to have my staff contact Dr. Wood's office to get somebody out there to interview.
And then that brings us to a present day. Unfortunately, the trial is still ongoing, so we don't currently know the entire picture. So I can't conclusively say if Jacob is suffering from any mental illness disorders like psychotic disorders, it's pretty obvious that he does suffer from some cognitive delays due to the traumatic brain injury and some sort of depression and anxiety. But as of like major psychotic disorders like schizophrenia or hallucinations, it's still unclear. That information hasn't been released publicly. I don't know if he finally participated in the sanity evaluation or not. A lot of people online have been speculating about potential motives for Jacob's murder. The most popular one seems to be blaming the Stockdale parents for their aggressive or oppressive and strict parenting style, and they believe this caused Jacob to snap, or maybe there was some sort of abuse going on in the house that led Jacob to make this decision. This theory has then been backed up by the other mother that was featured on the wife swap episode, Lori Tonkovitch, who has done interviews about her own opinions after the Stockdale Family Murders and about the Stockdale Family Murders. So Lori told TMZ about her experience with the Stockdales on a wife swap, which like cringe, why you're talking to TMZ, but whatever. She says, quote, "When I switched the rules and I was going to let them have fun and have television and video games and experience life a little bit, Jacob ran outside crying. And when I asked what was wrong, he said that his mom and dad tell him that basically he would burn in hell. He lived in a very controlled environment, really wasn't allowed to do anything. He worked, homeschooled him, wouldn't let him go out amongst society. They're very religious. They aren't allowed to make choices. I think that it just caught up to them." I feel pretty uncomfortable blaming the parents so conclusively because there is so many unknowns. There have been no public allegations of like severe abuse within the household. And there's a lot of people that suffer from severe, very abusive childhoods by the hands of their parents or guardians, and they don't go on to harm or kill anyone. So that still has to be considered. And I don't think people are considering that a lot. Regardless on if I agree with the Stockdale family's parenting style, this is still a tragedy and their family is still grieving and struggling with what is happening to them. And I think they deserve the time and the space to grieve without these unfounded accusations. When Jacob's trial does commence and it does start, I think we'll have a bigger picture on what happened and maybe the motive as to why he did it. But till then, I'm sort of like abstaining from blaming any party. Like, we don't know if Jacob suffered from a mental health disorder or if there was significant abuse in the house. Like, we don't know that yet. So I'm not really speculating about that like others are. And it is interesting that Jacob's father, Tim, is very supportive of his son. He often visits and communicates with Jacob, and he attends every one of Jacob's hearings. So who knows what went on in the house, and hopefully when the trial begins, we'll have a better picture of what happened. I do, though, find it interesting to note about Jacob's alleged fear of technology. As previously mentioned, the Stockdale parents did limit their son's media consumption and their access to technology. So it's interesting to me that Jacob may now be fearful of it. And just something to think about. Anyways, that's it for this video. Please let me know what you think about the case. Please like and subscribe if you feel so inclined, and I'll post updates when they happen. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.
Thank you everyone for all the birthday well wishes last week. I had a great day full of friends and good music. It doesn't get much better than that. You'd think at 21 years old I'd be ready to grow up and join adulthood. Nah, not for me. Yeah. Is there a third option? I wish there was a third option.